Welcome back to the Jesus is Lucifer podcast. Uncle Foots here. I said in the first video that I was going to break down a lot of things, and I will be doing that. There's a lot to go through. One of the first things I find that we need to address, well, one of the things that I think is important to address at least, is what is going to frighten a lot of people about a podcast like this, about messages like this. The way that we're conditioned by Abrahamic faiths, we tend to get the sense that anything not in support of or anything speaking against or anything that in any way is critical of the holy scriptures is going to hinder our capacity to gain the rewards. That's not the truth of things. Everybody returns to the source. Everybody returns to the source. We may have to go through a few lifetimes before we've learned all the lessons required for us to interact on a higher level. But the ideal that only a few people are chosen is bullshit. Only us chosen people are going to get to reconnect with our loved ones and everybody else is not. That's not the truth. Now, you may have to go through several lifetimes before you acquire the proper understanding. You, I, us, we may have to do that. But eventually, everybody returns to the source. The What's in store for humanity, for Homo sapiens, is the same across the board. There are no chosen people, and that's again the bullshit. They want you to believe that only us are going to move forward and everybody else is going to be left behind. Not so. So that's the good news. You don't have to torture yourself. You don't have to beat yourself up. You don't have to live in fear of missing out on this elaborate prize that we've all been told about. Everybody returns. The future is the same for all of us in a way. So take some solace in that, I think. Your dead loved ones. And the reality is, if we're being truthful, whether we're talking about ourselves or talking about people that we know, we have a lot of issues. And a lot of us are dying long before we get to iron those issues out. And so we get this sense again that, oh my God, they're going to go to hell. Bullshit. That's just not how it is. That's not how it is. Anyway, again, back into the meat of it all. One of the issues that I've had, one of the issues that has developed relative to the Abrahamic traditions is the amount of excuses that I found myself having to make when I was following these traditions relative to things that are clearly in the book, certain stories, certain ideals. I mean, I was just talking about this whole hell thing, right? You're going to burn for eternity. Only live for 21 fucking years. You're going to burn for eternity. I got to make up an excuse to make that make sense. That doesn't make sense. You know, I always say 21 years because I knew a guy, a young dude who died at 21. And there was an occasion where he and we weren't close friends, but we were all in the same general neighborhood. And there was a party one night that the two of us were at, and he and I, for some reason, ended up isolated in a certain, like in a backyard or something, and we were just talking. And he told me some things. I think we were all drinking and probably high off some shit. But he was telling me some things about his life that I didn't know. It was weird that he was telling me, but he had grown up. His mother was on drugs, and she was abusive, and she let her boyfriends abuse him. And then he went into foster care and he ran into some foster parents that were also abusive. So he was AWOL all the time, always leaving, always running off. And if you know the streets at all, y'all know what a writer is. He was a writer. Everybody knew him, knew that he was with that business. And I'm sure he did some things that um, would send him to hell, according to certain stories. But when you hear this other part of the story, when you hear his background, it's like, well, it's understandable you'd be fucked up. You know, you telling me that this person who died at 21 is going to burn for a million years for those 21 fucked up years that he lived? That doesn't make any sense. And that's just not the way it is. That's not the way things are. Um, So yeah, you always got to make some excuse. There's a verse in the Bible that tells you to hate your mother. Hate. This is Jesus speaking, by the way. He tells you that if you do not hate your mother, hate your father, hate your children, hate your siblings, hate your very life, you cannot be my follower. That's pretty extreme, dude. You know, I mean, if the message is that I have to be willing to let them go or forsake them, well, you could just say that. Why do I got to hate them? Why do I got to hate my life? That's a bit much, don't you think? Hate my life? So I got to make an excuse for that. You got to kill your own child, right? I mean, that's the story of Abraham, and that's what we're encouraged to follow, that ideology, that way of being. You love God so much that you'll kill your child. I got to make an excuse for that because that doesn't make sense. Well, what he means is bullshit, dude. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. There's a story where God, as often is the case, is telling the Israelites to go and kill some people. And within that killing, kill all the goats and donkeys. I'm so mad. I want his head on a platter. Again, more shit I got to make excuses for because that doesn't make sense. For a loving, forgiving God. He's so mad that I got to kill all the donkeys and all the goats on top of killing all the people, on top of brutalizing the old women and little children. This is what he's suggesting. Nah. And so why are we following this? You know, I mentioned this in the first video. We're following it because we've been seduced by these shiny rewards and we don't want to miss out. So we close our eyes. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, I didn't hear that. You did. And you know that it's wrong. And the test of it all is, do we find the wherewithal, the integrity to stand up and say, no, I don't care about these rewards. I won't align with that. Killing all these old women and little children. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to just sit by while that's happening. That's a higher, how to put it, um, that's higher character, right? That's higher morality to say that I will bypass the rewards because I'm not going to take part in that. Hmm. The Bible makes a whole lot of scientific misrepresentations that you kind of just have to brush over. Again, make excuses for, act like you didn't see it. How does 4 days pass if the sun hasn't been created? Which is, if you read the story carefully, that's what's happened. There is no sun yet, but he says 4 days have passed. That doesn't make any sense. There's a scripture that lists bats with a bunch of birds. Birds, like I think it was talking about things that you can't eat. And it mentions bats. Bats are not birds. Yeah, it flies, but so do mosquitoes. They're not birds either. You know, again, scientific misrepresentations. Um, there's light before there's stars. There's plants before there's light. None of this shit makes any sense. And I personally, I believe that all of this stuff that I'm talking about is put there purposely. They're clues. I mean, the whole biblical tradition is a big test. Are you really paying attention? Are you really paying attention? Or are you just reading blindly, trying to appease to the train conductor, the guy who's driving the ship that's going to take you off into La La Land, which is most often the case. We don't realize it. We're just trying to appease the God of the Bible. We're not really looking, we're not really paying attention. There's so much of these things that just don't make sense. A magical boat that carries two of every animal on the planet. So the kangaroos from Australia, right? Australia is the only place that has kangaroos. After the boat landed, the kangaroos swam over the water back to Australia. That doesn't make sense. That does not make sense. One of the first things that triggered all of this line of questioning and kind of the first straw or the first thing that drove me in a different direction from the Abrahamic traditions was when I realized that with all the years of practice, all the years of being a part of the tradition, I didn't know the 10 Commandments. And this was about 12 years ago, 12, 14 years ago. I realized, and that was kind of weird. Like, damn, I don't even know what the Ten Commandments are. Be honest with yourself. Think about it. Do you know what they are? Some of you do, I'm sure. But a lot of you, no, not off the top of your head. But anyway, so I looked them up. I looked up the Ten Commandments, and I was struck by something. Again, this is one of the first things that really started to stick out for me and made me realize that something was wrong here. That first thing was the second commandment. The second commandment says, do not make graven images of things that are in heaven, things that are on the earth, or things that are under the earth's waters, whatever under the earth's waters means. The cross is a graven image. I've talked about this with some people, and again, the excuses. No, it's not. Yes, the fuck it is. The cross is a graven image, right? If you remember the story of Moses going into the mountains and God giving him the Ten Commandments, right? What was happening when he came out of those mountains? He came out of the mountains and found the Israelites singing and dancing around a golden calf. And this so upset him that he smashed the two tablets that God had just given him. The golden calf has morphed into a golden cross. That's all. The golden calf has morphed into a golden cross. You're not supposed to do that. Second commandment says, do not make graven images of things in heaven. Where is Jesus? Right? The cross is representative of Jesus, and Jesus is supposedly where? In heaven. Not supposed to be doing that. And this is so central to the tradition. The Ten Commandments are the moral code, right? Every church you go to, just about, has a cross hanging, dead body on it a lot of times. Not to mention, drinking the blood, eating his flesh. Does that sound like God, or does that sound like the devil? That sounds more like the devil. It's telling you to drink my blood, eat my flesh. No bueno. There's a lot wrong with this tradition. A lot. And a lot of it is just philosophical. You don't really have to know all of the details, all of the scriptures to start and find problems. Like I said, burn for eternity. I fucking lived for 80 years. How does that make sense? And, in my experience with people are really good. The Bible says that they're all bad. People are good, actually. And this is important because there's a lot of really good people within the Abrahamic traditions. I mean, the best people that I've met in my life have been followers of Abraham, whether Christian or Muslim or Jewish, even. I say Jewish even because I don't know that many Jews, but I have met some. I knew one of my Zen teachers was a Jewish rabbi, and what a great guy, incredible guy. Though I believe that the Abrahamic traditions are playing on our sometimes often naivete. I don't know how you say that word exactly, but we're naive, is the sense. We're naive when we don't realize, right? The Abrahamic traditions are not good for most of the humans on the planet. It's only good for me, really, right? We have this ego thing, and we tend to think of it as I'm that chosen person. I'll be one of those chosen people. Me and mine will be the chosen ones, and everybody else is going to be left outside in the storm, and we don't care about them. We're not thinking about them. They had their chance. I worked in the jails for a lot of years, and so I got very familiar with a lot of people's stories. I was a chaplain, a Buddhist chaplain, for a number of years, and I was able to get intimate with a lot of people and hear their stories. And when you hear these stories, you start to understand why people are off. Going back to this friend of mine that I was at this party with, when you hear people's stories, you start to understand why they're off. And to say that they're deserving of an eternity of torture, nah, couldn't be. Couldn't be. That cannot be right. Anyway, I'll be back.